Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar, and today we're going to be talking about David. Now, it's been about a few months since I've talked about David, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I'm a person that follows a lot of creepy internet things that go on, a lot of scary shenanigans that happen in our world. But today's video, I want to be very serious about it. We are talking about a person that allegedly has murdered a 14-year-old girl, allegedly cut up her body, and allegedly stuffed that into a Tesla, right? So again, these are some very, very serious claims. So 6 months ago, I talked about a guy named David, who, for anybody that doesn't remember, was a pretty popular artist, a pretty up-and-coming artist at the time, somebody in the music industry. He was a young guy, and he was literally on tour at the time. Out of nowhere, 7 months ago, there was a situation where, again, a Hollywood tow yard had a Tesla that was found with a body inside it. So for instance, inside this Hollywood tow yard, they would find this Tesla, they would open up the actual frunk of the vehicle, which is another sort of smaller trunk, and law enforcement officers would discover that there would actually be a cut up, unidentifiable body. You know, at the time, the body was so badly decomposed that trying to identify it wasn't necessarily a possibility at the time. So, of course, obviously, months down the road, and through a long, venturous process, the law enforcement agencies ended up concluding, alongside the internet investigators in parallel, that the body belonged to a young girl known as Celeste Riva Hernandez. Now, I talked about this whole situation as it happened literally 6 or 7 months ago, and the thing about it is for a while, everything kind of went quiet. David was basically somebody that cut all of his tours off, and, you know, it almost felt like the LAPD was kind of doing nothing, right? The internet investigators, the people on Reddit were sort of looking through every aspect of connection. So, for instance, this Celeste Riva Hernandez is this girl that apparently had met David all the way back. Internet investigators even went back so far as to look through Discord messages. People even found older clips of David and her together. So for instance, right over here, one of the more infamous clips is obviously David has Celeste on stream and even starts telling the moderators for that live stream to start deleting VODs after the stream it ends. So listen to this one.
Yo, wait.
Oh, look it. Answer that one. That's so mean if you don't answer
Which
that.
one? What's good, David? Big fan, big spot me. Oh, thank you, Mitochondria. Appreciate you.
I gotta stop with him if you even...
We
need to delete this.
Maz, can we delete all VODs? And then as soon as the stream ends, delete the stream too?
So it's kind of weird, right? You have him talking about deleting VODs, the mentioning of like the age gap between these two individuals, and of course, ultimately, people started to look at various matching tattoos. They had identified, basically around the same time, I guess, as law enforcement agencies, that Celeste Riva Hernandez was actually, you know, right here. It was an insane situation. So again, this whole David situation just kind of died down for a little bit after that because obviously the law enforcement agencies were doing their thing and there really wasn't much being discovered. In fact, if anything, at the time, people were probably hindering the David investigation by finding possible pieces of evidence and contaminating them with their own fingerprints, right? As is that point when people found like one of the possible Tesla key cards for the actual vehicle just sitting out on the street, allegedly, of course, in this situation. So why are we talking about David all of a sudden today? Well, David has been found charged with a brutal and horrific death of a teen. So I would have talked about this before the weekend because there was actually a pretty huge development where he was arrested, literally, I believe, in Hollywood at the time. So according to the old TMZ over here, they ended up grabbing the actual arrest footage. They're the ones that kind of have been covering this stuff the most. You can see law enforcement vehicles, you can see a whole litany of cops, and of course, obviously, they are just arresting this individual. So you can actually see him right over here. You know, he's going to turn around and have his arms completely like, you know, behind his back like cuffed. So yeah, they're just prepping him for transport at that point. And you can see right over here, the actual, they brought in the whole SWAT team, the marshals, everything to execute this like arrest warrant. And I believe it was actually, he was arrested in the Hollywood Hills. So kind of the same place, I believe, where his like home actually was. That was like that law enforcement agencies were kind of looking at. So he was arrested, and the reason I didn't cover it was because as the arrest happened, there was really nothing that came out of the DA office on Friday that kind of signaled them making any statement. It was just the LAPD executing an arrest. So according to, again, the David charges, he will face 3 charges in the investigation into the murder of Celeste Riva Hernandez. Of course, this unfortunate 14-year-old girl that was basically killed, and people had attempted to hide her in probably the worst way possible, thankfully, because that ended up leading to their arrest. So this includes first-degree murder, this includes murder for financial gain, and murdering a witness to an investigation. So these are very important charges to remember. These charges, when combined together, could potentially make him eligible for the death penalty. And that's actually an interesting, portion of this case that I'll discuss a little further. The charges involve numerous acts with a minor and the mutilation of a body. So that's according to the LA District Attorney Nathan Hochman, who's literally wanted to be more tougher on crime. And there's nothing, there's no situation that presents itself better than this to be tougher on crime. Obviously, I think all of us, 100% of the people watching, can agree that what happened over here is probably one of the most disgusting things that we've seen in the last decade, really, when it comes to one of the most heinous crimes that has been such a public spectacle. Prosecutors will present evidence that Rivas was a witness into an investigation against Burke for acts committed when she was under 14 years old, Hochman had said. So Riva Hernandez went to Burke's house on the 23rd of April 2025 and was then never seen again, according to the district attorney. The police chief addressed criticism of how the case was handled, and of course, this is where I'm going to kind of push back a little bit. So, 7 months ago, they had found the body in the Tesla. And, the body at the time was so horribly, not just decomposed, rather, that identifying who the fuck it was and how things had happened was actually a difficulty for, again, the actual law enforcement agencies. When it comes to arresting somebody on homicide or something like this, you want your case to be as airtight as you can. So you do spend your time crossing every T and dotting every I, because if the LAPD didn't do that, or the district's office didn't do that, then it would basically mean that David has a chance of getting away. And he probably could have a chance of getting away, because remember, these are only allegations and charges we've talked about. Under the US system, you are presumed innocent until proven guilty. So he's going to have his lawyers obviously take this to trial, and he's already pleaded non-guilty in this situation. So you can see right over here, the charges include the most serious charges the DA's office can bring, and that is first-degree murder with special circumstances. So he described that the special circumstance was, again, killing the victim for the financial gain, which is to maintain his very lucrative music career that Celeste was threatening. So the charges specifically mentioned over here are also charges that have a special connotation to them. So this is Penal Code 261, 368. Obviously, this is the range, but the specific chapter is, I think, 281 to 289, which is bigamy, incest, and crime against nature. So actually, 28.8.5 says any person who either resides in the same home with a minor child or has access to a child over a period of time, not less than 3 months, engages in 3 or more acts with a substantial conduct with a child, is typically somebody that they're going to be pressing for this continued access to a child and committing continued sick acts with them. Of course, the other thing they also mentioned too was the special condition for the murder, which they also said that when she threatened to expose his criminal conduct, and according to the law enforcement agency, they kind of have the proof for this, according to their statements at least. And devastate his music career, Burke allegedly murdered her, cut her up, and stuffed her body in 2 bags, and were placed in the front trunk of his car. So they've actually just tried to mention him by name, right over here, so not like him and an accomplice, literally just him. There, the dismembered body sat for over 4 months, decomposing until it was found at a tow yard. Again, I don't know why he would consider leaving this body in the trunk of a car. I don't know if he understood that bodies decompose and this will eventually get caught. But thankfully, in his stupidity, he allegedly ended up getting caught, according to, again, the prosecution's office. And again, the implication was that Celeste was going to come out and basically say that, listen, David is with me, a minor. And, in this situation, obviously, you can imagine, right? Like, even in the YouTube space, as small and pissant as we are, and again, in any space, really, right? It doesn't have to be the internet space, the influencer space, or the celebrity space. It could even be situations where, again, you just have a regular job. If it ever comes out that you are a child predator, well, you're not going to have that job, and rightfully so, most of the fucking world is gonna want you on death row, which is actually a possibility where he's headed to. So if the actual prosecution's office can make the maximum sentence exist or persist in this case, the possibility of life in prison without the possibility of parole or the death penalty if convicted can be charged. So this is something where, again, even Hochman is adding that the determination of whether prosecutors will seek the death penalty will be made at a later time. Now, here's the thing about the death penalty in California. Technically, from my research, the death penalty in California exists. However, back in 2019, the governor, Gavin Newsom, filed a moratorium which basically stopped all of the actual death penalty stuff. It stopped the executions from happening. In fact, California is one of those states where, the death penalty is basically something that exists, but it's never going to happen to you. And of course, a lot of that legally could change. At some point down the road, governors like Gavin Newsom can be replaced with somebody else that may choose to get rid of the shaky moratorium. But there's actually a silver lining to the death penalty still. Even if David never gets executed by the state, given a death penalty, punishment, that means his chances of parole, from my research at least, and again, I'm not a lawyer, means that he will never be allowed outside the prison for the alleged crimes right now that he has allegedly committed. If he's proven guilty of this, which honestly all roads kind of point to that, given everything that we've researched in the last 7 months, and probably whatever the fuck the actual DA has, yeah, he's never going to see the light of day again. And honestly, I think serving your natural life in a prison cell is arguably worse, in my opinion, than just dying, because here's the thing with the death penalty. You don't just die the next day. Obviously, you write down you file appeals until, of course, you cannot file appeals anymore. And then, of course, then the state will just fucking execute you. But if, in this situation, you are not granted that appeal and you die, I think for the crimes that have allegedly been committed, we are talking about a 14-year-old girl getting killed, dismembered, and basically left to rot. If this guy or anybody connected to him, allegedly, was even somewhat competent at hiding a fucking body, they figured out how to get rid of her. Maybe it was burn her until no trace existed. Maybe it was if these people were even incompetent at doing this kind of stuff, God forbid, this man allegedly would be getting away with all of this. We would not even have a body to even consider a homicide case. So now that this is all here, obviously we've got this situation. I think if he is really guilty, and again, I'm keeping it until he's obviously 100%, convicted of it, then he deserves to rot the rest of his natural life in prison. I think that's actually the worst case. Dying is the easy way out, okay? Living with the guilt, rightfully so, of the sin that you've committed while you're sitting in a concrete fucking coffin is probably the best way to go. Have you seen how they treat people in fucking prisons in general, all over, just in the US? Okay, it's a bad time. David's gonna have a bad fucking time. David's gonna be eating like shit, living like shit, and frankly, if he's guilty of this, he deserves every bit of shit going towards him. Now, obviously, one of the things that really burns me too in this story is how much everyone let down Celeste Rivas, right? Now, this is a girl that obviously at the time when we were looking at her, there was a lot of speculation and discussion that she had multiple IDs and she was somebody that loved to party with people. And remember, she is a minor at the end of the day. When I was a minor, I did a fair share of stupid things on my own end. I can't deny that, this girl probably got into trouble, right? But she is ultimately a minor. Any adult involved in this situation that was giving her narcotics, taking advantage of her sexually, assaulting her violently, those people are guilty 100% of those sins that they've committed, right? I'm not going to sit here and victim blame a fucking minor for crying out loud. But the reality of this is that, when you look at people like Celeste Rivas, she was found missing. She was, the family was called, the family was called to the home 11 times, according to this piece. And in some cases, she was found with David long before this. I mean, she was, like we saw earlier in the clip, streaming. She was on Instagram posts. She was in Discord messages. So it makes me wonder, how much did the parents in this case actually give a shit about this situation? how much did even the LAPD give a shit about the situation, knowing the contextual history that they had as time had gone on? You know, and that's sort of where my mind kind of unfortunately goes to in situations like this, because I feel like if the system and the family had also done their fair part of due diligence, this girl might actually still be living and alive today, right? And David, you know, if he, at the time he done something with her, we'd be looking at him, he'd be going to jail for far different circumstances. A homicide would not have happened, right? But then again, that's kind of life itself. That's all we human beings can do, is we can just sit there and speculate about every fucking thing imaginable. The reality of it is nobody's going to know what that alternate dimension looks like. What we do know is the current dimension that we're in, and that dimension involves a dead little child and a disgusting, horrific monster, allegedly, of course, who took advantage and, unfortunately, at the very end, allegedly took that person's life. Sorry, it's a disgusting situation to really think about. And honestly, given David, I think that if all of this stuff is proven to be true, which I think after 6-7 months, the attorney's office, the LAPD have put together probably what I imagine is an airtight case. This guy isn't really getting out of it. And sure, he can plead non-guilty all he wants. Obviously, I imagine that's probably the only aspect his lawyers want him to go, given how serious the nature of these crimes have gotten. But I guess time will tell, right? Trials take some time. We'll see how this goes, and I definitely will be covering it when this guy is 100% convicted. But for now, it's kind of looking like he may actually get the death penalty, which is wild in the fucking state of California. Whether that gets executed, that's up for another debate. But if he gets a death penalty, the interesting part about that will be that he will live out, from my understanding, the rest of his natural life in a prison. Which, if he's guilty of this shit, 100% the best case scenario, given the circumstances. Now, obviously, the big thing about this is one of the reasons why we're going to look closely into it is obviously the defense attorneys. So, in this situation, Blair Burke, the lead attorney over here, love these last name similarities, we believe the actual evidence will show David Burke did not murder Celeste Riva Hernandez. We would like to have the evidence come into the light of day. So that's what Burke told. After months of secret grand jury proceedings, she would like a public preliminary hearing to take place as soon as possible so a judge can decide whether there is enough evidence for trial. Burke is entitled under California law to have the evidentiary hearing within 10 court days of his arraignment. Nearly all defendants waived their right to have it happen that fast, but he didn't. A hearing to work out what will happen next was scheduled for Thursday. So, of course, obviously the deputy attorney, the district attorney, was like, we'll be very happy to put the evidence that we've collected. So, again, the silver bullet I would have to speculate and imagine here would be if the defense can prove that David wasn't involved and actually they really know who ended up killing this girl. But that would be a twist and turn that, frankly, I do actually expect out of a case so grotesquely and morbidly mesmerizing. Just something that has been such a weird... I mean, how often do you... I've driven by that road where the Tesla was towed from. And it's insane to think that, you know, there could have been a possibility at times where you drive by a road like that and there's a car parked in the California sun and you think, could it have a fucking body in it? I mean, that's insane times that we live in. So beyond the fact that they the defense filed those, evidentiary hearings, which, again, obviously kind of a unusual thing to see, considering that generally in most cases it always goes the other way. Even the defense for David, who he actually has, I believe, 3 firms fighting on his behalf, he one of the actual lawyers talking about this actually talked about how there was a lack of discovery that even the defense received. So, obviously the argument is at the same time when you're giving out these complaints like the ones you're seeing over here, holding these press conferences, why haven't you absolutely brought this up in a discovery sense to the actual, defense? So actually, they're right over here. Silverman objected that the defense collected so far has voluminous noted that The DA's office had the time for a detailed press conference, as we said earlier, as Silverman cast doubt on there being much material available for a planned follow-up hearing later this week. Burke asked the prosecution to endeavor with conscientious earnestness to get as much discovery as possible to her team. So in a lot of ways, the actual movement by the prosecution is something that, just the nature of how they're acting is what the defense is targeting in this case. So, obviously it's going to be interesting to see how this thing plays out. Clearly, it seems like the prosecution has what they believe to be a silver bullet, but obviously at the same time, their actions are being, critically assessed, obviously, by the defense. And listen, I don't know, but when you sue somebody, when there's a trial, when something like this goes on, there's a chance that it goes one of either ways. Sometimes it's like rolling the dice. So really, it's time to see how this huge passioned trial, huge passion court proceeding ends up as, right? Like, that's what we're looking at going forward for the next few months. But ladies and gentlemen, this is me, Mudahar, and if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe just like it I about.